All right. So I am super excited to share this week's guest with you. And it's kind of an interesting story because I met this fabulous woman in, I think it was Phoenix. Was it Phoenix we met in?
Yep.
Phoenix, Arizona. And guess what? She's from freaking Nova Scotia. I lived in Nova Scotia for 5 years and I didn't meet women like this when I was in Nova Scotia. And here is this gem of a woman, Eleanor Beaton. She is absolutely awesome. And you are going to love this conversation. Eleanor, welcome to She Talks Business.
Thank you. Yeah. And I still can't believe that Nova Scotia contains the two of us for an overlapping 5 years and we never met. And people, this Nova Scotia is the kind of place where that doesn't happen. So,
We can,
it doesn't happen. So it took a lot for us not to cross paths there, I'm telling you.
I think we could have solved every problem that province had if the
I
two of
think
us had
so.
met each other.
I agree. I agree.
All right. So before we dive in and talk about books, let's talk about you and your business because I love this, that you are on a mission to advance global gender equity by doubling the number of women entrepreneurs who scale past 1 million in revenues by 2030. So tell us what you do.
Yes. So I have a company, Safi Media. We focus on entrepreneurship education, business coaching, and storytelling with a gender lens. And the easiest way to kind of think about the work that we do and how we are using the work that we do to advance gender equity is we're basically trying to work with women entrepreneurs and the ecosystem that surrounds entrepreneurs. And it could be things like government policies, banks, funding systems, venture capital. We are trying to shift how women entrepreneurs do business and the businesses that they build so they're able to construct businesses that deliver cash, influence, and autonomy. And most businesses, sort of the rule of economic growth right now is more is better. Mm-hmm. And you basically burn fuel, whether that's your time, your energy, in order to grow. And I think a lot of women entrepreneurs are trying to find ways to make that shift, to create businesses that are more sustainable, to be able to have all of that ambition, to have that goal to drive revenue growth without burning yourself out. So that's what all of our programs, whether it's our coaching programs, our podcast, all of the initiatives that we do are really geared toward helping women entrepreneurs do that successfully.
So it was interesting because you and I met at this event in Phoenix and you were on stage talking for a few minutes and you were talking about things that I had never heard before related to women in business. So can you share with us, what are 3 things that you see that get in the way of women being successful in business? What are 3 things that women are not doing that they could be doing or should be doing? Like through the lens of your work, what would you say those are?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. So one big thing I think that we are not doing to the extent that we could be is using other people's money, OPM. Mm-hmm. So this is really interesting. When you take a look at how much venture capital or how much funding that women entrepreneurs have access to, we basically have maybe 3% of all venture capital. And venture capital is a form of investment. I know you know this, Lisa, but some people won't be familiar with it. It's a form of investment where you have investors putting money into companies. They take a stake in your company. And this is really about money that helps your business grow. And there's other forms of investors. You could have angel investors, but the idea is that a lot of our male counterparts, it's like second nature to them when they think about expanding their business. They start to ask themselves, who would invest in this? Who can give me money to help me do this?
Right.
And for so many women entrepreneurs, we never think of that. We think, what can I sell? What can I do? How can I use my labor to get the money I need to invest in growth? I'm not saying that we're wrong, but I think that the way that we think about money is something that we get versus a tool that we use to grow. So I would agree. That's one fundamental thing. Yeah,
I would agree. And the interesting thing that I have seen is that men who get capital and or private investments, et cetera, some of them are pretty darn cavalier about the money and what happens to the company. Whereas I think women would feel this deep moral sense of obligation to manage the money and make sure that it did good things. Now, obviously there are exceptions, but I got to tell you, I've invested in some companies, and the companies I've invested in have been led by men, and I've seen that money just kind of vanish. And there doesn't seem to be any remorse.
No, it's really interesting there. And the research proves that out, that when women entrepreneurs and women founded companies get money, their returns on that money are usually higher. We just get so much less of the money, like a fraction of the share. And so I think just normalizing using other people's money, I think is a really important thing that would shift the needle a little bit for women entrepreneurs. The second thing, and it's related to this, I call this the money labor bias for women entrepreneurs, and it's connected. And it's this idea that a lot of times we automatically connect labor and doing work with generating revenue. And the majority of women-owned businesses are service-based businesses, and so we're typically getting into business because we are really good at something. It could be doing lashes. It could be doing HR consulting. We're getting into business because we have this sort of technical skill. And that's a really good thing. Like I can remember when I started my first business, there was a period where for me, it was a business of convenience. I was raising my two sons. I wanted to make great money, but I didn't want to have a team. I didn't want too much pressure. I just wanted to maximize my personal income for every hour that I worked. And that was great until it came time to really thinking about how I could scale that and how I could start investing in intangible assets, and building intangible assets, which can be processes, they can be packaged services, they can be specific offerings. But the key to scaling a service-based business is to really start to look at investing in intangible assets. And so I think that sort of money labor bias that women entrepreneurs have, and not having this automatic connection between doing the work and making money, can be really huge as well. I'm not sure if you've seen this phenomenon at work.
Well, I've seen it at work in myself, because I am a great generator. So I can relate to, we need to make more money, or I'll just go generate more, I'll go do more stuff. And I also, in my business model, I have a team that provides a service as well. And so there's profit built into that so that the business generates money. But I completely understand what you're saying. It's let's try harder, let's work harder, let's do more in order to scale and grow. And at some point you reach a capacity limit because you can't take a day off, right? Because you become, I believe that in a lot of cases, most people live above their means, not below their means. And so the more they make, the more they spend in a lot of cases. And so people get into this trap of, I can't afford to not work as much as I'm working because my lifestyle, I need this money to support my lifestyle. And so they're killing themselves in their work.
Yes. And we talked about that in Phoenix. Like when you're really not looking at the numbers, you don't really have a high level of financial literacy with respect to your business. And look, there's no shame in that. I think that actually many entrepreneurs generally lack financial literacy, much less basic numeracy. And I am in that group. That's something that I've had to work really hard as a business owner. There've been so many times over in my career where I realized that not having that knowledge was actually fueling poor business decision making. And I love that about what you bring, because that's not you at all. I don't know. You know what I mean? You seems to me like you came into the business world having a really strong backing in financial literacy, particularly as entrepreneurial finance. But it's just key. It's key.
I think, my days of working for TELUS, working for a big organization like that, every KPI is measured. And even in the role that I was in, I had P&L responsibility to a certain degree. And even though there were certain things that I couldn't control, I still had to sit in meetings with financial people to understand the P&L of our business unit. And so and I've just always been a numbers person. It's
Yeah.
just always been one of these things, because I believe the data doesn't lie. And when I work with people, I always want to see the numbers, and I want to make
Yeah.
sure that they understand the difference between profit and cash flow, and why you don't have money to pay your taxes at the end of the year is because you're not managing cash flow. You're spending your profit, right? Like I
Yes.
love digging into that stuff.
Yes. It's
Super
key. It's
important.
huge. Yeah. And then
Mhm.
I feel like the last thing that is really key for women entrepreneurs, and again, this one is all entrepreneurs, but women entrepreneurs in particular, I think, so many women entrepreneurs flock to other groups where it's primarily women entrepreneurs. And I think that's really important. It really creates this feeling of community. It can create a feeling of safety, which is so key for women to take risk. But there's a challenge, which is that when we all get together, sometimes what I notice happens, or a trend that I can sometimes see, is that we're not engaging in true exponential thinking. And
Mhm.
so, what happens, I think about things like the Peter Thiel question, which is, what would happen if you had to make your 10-year vision or your 5-year vision come true in 3 months? What would you need to do?
Mhm.
And so that starts to obliterate small incremental thinking, and it starts to open the door to massive moves. Not that we have to do it, but I think it really can inject into how we look at our businesses a truly different way of thinking. And I think that's something that's really beneficial to women entrepreneurs, because a lot of us aren't in these sort of super big thinking, tech-based Silicon Valley circles where these types of conversations are a lot more normal. And so we miss out on the power of how they can shift what we think is possible and
Yeah.
how we envision our future.
Yeah, I would agree. So now I'm going to move to books, and I'm going to talk about a book. We read U Squared before we went to that event in Phoenix, and I bought that book, and I bought Quantum Leap, both by Price Pritchett,
Mhm.
for my beach house mastermind attendees. And the first 2 days that we were there, we did masterminding, and everybody talked about what their goals were for 2023. And then on the third day, I facilitated work on what is a quantum leap. And I put these women into groups together, groups of 3, and they each had 30 minutes. And the goal was to pour into each other the quantum leap you saw for them.
Oh, that is so good.
And
That's like a reverse Shark Tank.
yes. And
That's
so
amazing.
by the end of that day, guess what? Everyone's goals were, like, some of them were 10x, some of them were 5x, but the goals that they walked away with were significantly different than the goals that they started with. And the goals that they started with already felt big. And
Mm.
I loved that these women called each other out on not thinking big enough, and that they just shared, you could do this, and you could do this, and you could do this, and you could do this. And then all of a sudden it's like this big opening happened. And I think it's so important to be around people that can see your potential. One of
Yeah.
my favorite quotes from a David C. Baker book called The Business of Expertise is, you can't read the ingredients on the outside of the jar when you're in the jar. So when
Yes.
you're in it, you can't see what other people see on the outside. And so I think you're right. Being in those environments, myself, I joined Strategic Coach this year. And so I
Mm.
went to my first meeting in Chicago in January, and there's like 30 people in the room. Guess how many women are in the room?
Um, 4.
3. 3 women. And it was great. It was
Yes,
great because guys don't put limitations on their thinking the same way.
they
They
don't.
don't say, do you think I can do that? Do you really think it's possible for
It's the
me?
flip side of
It's
what we were
opposite.
talking about earlier. There's not that same sense of responsibility for all
Mhm.
the details all the time.
Yes.
And this is why I think is so key I so agree with you, to be able to have the benefit of both.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's really key to not have to be limited by the details of the how.
Yeah.
So that's like such a good
Mhm.
question that you asked. I went through an exercise with a group that I run where the question posed to them was, because we were looking at a Duolingo, the language app. This is like my favorite case study, where basically built by a bunch of smart people who wanted to make English language training available to everybody, because it's a huge career advantage outside of non-English speaking countries, like for most of the world, to be able to speak English. So these guys get well over $100 million in funding, and from all these different like premier creme de la creme venture capital investors. And they get their last sort of tranche from Capital G, which is Google's venture capital arm. And the person comes and she says, look, we need to go have a drink, she says to the founder. And she says, look, there's no bigger fool than us. There's no more dumb money. Like, we are the last place that you are going to get funding where you have zero revenue. And it took him 6 months to convince his leadership team that making money was important, because they were just like, oh, we'll just get money from, these things and make this product that's so good for folks to use. So the question was, you get $1 million in funding and 12 months runway. What do you do with the money? And it was a really powerful question to start thinking about. What would these long-standing projects be that a company might invest with to fuel long-term growth without the press of the need for short-term cash? So I think these questions, we just have to be, and I think that's probably why we like each other so much. We just have to be around women who are having these conversations and facilitating these conversations, and it just creates opening.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this, part of the reason that Eleanor and I are having this conversation is because we both got on a plane and we went to an event and we connected face to face, belly to belly, heart to heart, and got to know each other. We didn't know each other prior to that event. And if you are sitting at home and all you're doing is connecting with people on Zoom, you need to get out of the comfort zone of your office and get your pajama pants and your slippers off and dress up nicely and go to an event and meet some people. Not only will it be good for your soul, but it will be good for your brain and the way that you think about business. Absolutely. So let's talk about books, because that's really why I invited you, but you're so ridiculous.
My favorite topic.
But you're so smart. I couldn't not ask you the other stuff. So, everyone says to me, I don't know where you find time to read. You're so busy. You have so much going on. Where do you find time to read? And I always say, I don't find time. I make time. It's important. So what is your reading habit? How many books a year do you read? How do you make time to read? Talk to me a little bit about why books are important to you.
Books are the opening of a gateway to a new idea and a new way of thinking about things. And so for me, it's like breathing fresh oxygen, to read books. And I really feel like it oxygenates my thinking, it oxygenates my mind, it oxygenates my spirit. It gives me a new lens to look at things. Reading is like one of my number one hobbies. I probably read about 40 books a year, I would say. So I probably read about 40 books a year. So not as much as some people, and not as much as I used to. I cut down a little bit, and I spend a little bit more time with sort of active reading. So active note-taking, being quite geeky, which is funny. But my reading habits are thus. So I have set reading times in the beginning of the day. So I sort of get up, and then I have about 30 minutes of reading before I have breakfast with my kids and stuff. So I take about 30 minutes at the beginning of the day, and that's typically where it's 100% going to be nonfiction. And I really sort of challenge myself between sort of two things. So one is to sort of deepen my technical knowledge around things related to gender equity. And then the other part of that is like personal development or growing as an entrepreneur. So it's normally what I do there. And then I read novels or biographies in the evening before bed. And then if I have other periods of time, so if it's the weekend, I'll often be spending a couple hours a day curled up on my couch reading, but those are my reading habits, and I'm pretty religious about them.
Yeah, it sounds like me. I've always got a book on the end table next to where I sit on the couch because that's where I read in the morning. There's always a
Same.
book on my nightstand. And
Yes.
I don't read business books before I go to bed because I wouldn't be able to sleep.
I know.
In my mind, you just
Totally
be like,
can't
ah.
sleep.
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely the same. And I've gotten into the habit too of listening to audiobooks if I'm driving somewhere because I feel like I'm not a huge audiobook fan because I like to write in my books and I like to underline things and make notes. And I have this whole system of flagging to the side and flagging to the top so that I can find things. But I do find that it's valuable to listen to an audiobook if I'm in the car for a couple of hours going somewhere. I will
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like story based. I really liked David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
Mhm.
I listened to that on audio, and I've been listening to Spare by Prince
I
Harry
I'm
on
listening to
audio.
Spare right now too. Yeah,
He has
that's what I've
quite
been
the
listening
accent.
to. He
Exactly.
does. He's got a great accent. And David Goggins, I read that book years ago, but I heard that the audio version of that book was even better because he does this debrief at the end of each chapter. So
Yeah,
that's a really, really, really good book.
it is a
So
good one.
how would you say reading has impacted or influenced your professional life?
What an amazing question. I think it has impacted my professional life in both sharpening and broadening the insight that I am able to bring to issues. And because I'm like a writer and a podcaster and an advisor, insight is like the main currency of my business. It's my main offering, and so um, books have helped me to both sharpen my insight in terms of bringing tools and context and awareness that helps me ask better questions and be more incisive in terms of how I see things. But it has also broadened my perspective. There's this great quote from a historian and author named Howard Zinn that if you don't know history, you were born yesterday. And so I think that's what books do. They give us this broad insight into issues that help us to understand, the world that we live in. And so I think that's been like number one. They've also helped me become a better writer. So when I was growing up, my dad liked to read dense, complex books. And I was all about my dad. Like I was all about getting my dad's approval growing up. So he would recommend these books, or he would be reading a book. And then I would challenge myself to read the book. And they would be like a slog to get through, but they helped me understand language. And I think doing a ton of reading growing up and continuing to read a lot, it helps to make me a better writer. And just being a good writer is an excellent skill for anybody. So it's another way.
Have you ever read The Fifth Discipline?
No.
Oh, it's one of those really, really, really dense, it's like one of those books you have to read the pages twice sometimes just to get it. But it's a book, about strategy that most, I think probably Fortune 50 CEOs read, written by Peter Senge. And it's a fantastic book if you like those dense,
Yes,
hard to read, makes your brain work.
right. You just feel
That's one of
virtuous.
them.
It's like a workout, and you just feel super virtuous just being the person who reads books like that. I get it.
I feel super stupid.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what is that again? Wait a minute. I need to read that. I got to Google that word. I don't know what it means. And of course, I'm reading the papers. I'm like, what does this word mean?
Exactly. Oh, so funny.
All right. So talk to me about your three top books. Three books that have impacted your life the most, because I saw your list and I've only read one of them. So why don't you walk us through? Walk us through the books in order and tell us the name of the book and why you like that book and what the impact was.
This was such a difficult question. In some ways, the three books that have impacted me the most, because it's a little bit like, who's your favorite child? It depends on the day. And so, so here are the books that I chose. I chose Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. He wrote another book actually called Boundaries, which I almost put, it was almost on the list, but it didn't quite make it. So Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud, The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch, and Career and Family by Claudia Golden. Dr. Claudia Golden, if I have that correctly, if I'm being correct. So those are three books that I would say, if I think about my business and work and my approach, particularly over the last couple of years, I would probably say have had the biggest impact.
So tell us about the book. Start with one and tell us what the book was about and why it had such an impact and who you would recommend to read that book.
So I'll start with the 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. So he is an investor. He was essentially a management consultant, and he was a management consultant who started a pretty successful consultancy. Actually, the name is totally escaping me just now, but really successful management consultant who became an investor. And the book really talks about the Pareto principle, which is that, often 20% of our inputs, or 20% of our effort, but generally around 20% of your inputs equate to 80% of your results. And so by understanding this principle and applying it really effectively, you are able to generate much more positive results. You're able to make more money. You're able to have more meaningful relationships, et cetera, without overworking, And so that book, it's an entire book where essentially it's about one principle over and over and over, has been really, really huge because, for me, I dislike and I actually detest inefficiency. So,
me too.
Yeah, right. Like I hate it. I hate that. It was why it was difficult for me to be employed, earlier in my career, because in so many organizations, like it takes ruthlessness to apply the 80-20 principle. It really does. A lot of courage, autonomy. And I didn't have the autonomy to do that. So I felt a lot of times I was wasting my time or focusing on things that weren't important. So that book has been really important. And I think that it's key to any business person or entrepreneur, to be more effective at decision-making and more effective at choosing strategy, and so that I would really, I highly recommend the book.
I read that book. That's the one.
Oh, is that the one? Okay.
Yeah, of course. It's got numbers in it. Come on. and I love the 80-20 rule, even from a marketing perspective. If if you're listening, I challenge you to pull a report and list all of your customers and your sales in order of highest to lowest, and then highlight, the 20% highlight 80% of your sales, and then compare the number of customers on that list to the total number of customers. And you will likely find that 80% of your revenues are driven by 20% of your customers. The same is true for your marketing. It's true. You can see it in so many different ways. I love what you just said, though, about how it can help you to create greater efficiencies in your business. I read that book years ago. I read that book before I became an entrepreneur. I think it's time to go back and read that book again.
Right?
Yeah.
And even things like how 20% of your decisions drive 80% of your outcome. Like we were talking about where we live, where you choose to live, who you choose to marry. Like everybody, growing up, everybody's obsessed with what are they going to be. That is not the core decision. Really important decisions that we probably don't spend enough time looking at is who is the person you're going to spend your life with, and where will you live? Because those questions actually have a huge impact on your life, your choices, what's available to you. And ironically, they're often decisions that we really don't spend a ton of time looking at or talking about. So 80-20 rule, 80-20 rule all the way.
Yeah. Great, great, great book. Okay. So now I'm really curious about the other two because I haven't read those.
Right. Okay. So great. So they kind of go together. So 80/20, you start taking a look at your life and your business, and you start to do the exercise you just mentioned, Lisa, which is you start to draw these connections. Oh, wow, these inputs drive all the results.
Mm-hmm.
So that leaves a bunch of inputs that you could cut.
Mm.
It leaves it could be employees that really are fantastic people, but they're not really a fit in your organization. It could
Necessary
be
endings.
right. So how do you make these necessary endings?
Mm-hmm.
And so Necessary Endings is a fantastic book because it's written by a guy. He's an organizational psychologist, and he wrote a book called Boundaries, which is all around what boundaries are and effective boundary setting. I read that earlier. It was a great book also. And the thing is, whether you're setting boundaries or making decisions about cutting off options and being focused on other options, you have to be able to release things, but people don't like to release things. We don't like to say goodbye. We don't like to bring things to an end. We don't like to close things off. These things are, they're things that we don't like to do,
Mm-hmm.
and so Necessary Endings helps us understand why that is, helps us identify the places in life that we might be afraid about making a necessary ending, and therefore introducing a lot of fluff or extra or drama or crazy, to kind of substitute. But one of the most powerful things, that he talks about is this concept that life always produces excess.
Mm-hmm.
That the nature of life, if you think about an apple tree or a garden or whatever it is, the nature of life is that it always produces too much. And if you want to, you had a cider company, right?
Brewing company, beer.
Brewing company. So I think about cider. So cider, apple trees, like if you want a fruit tree to bear good fruit, you've got to prune the tree.
Right.
You've got to prune the rose bushes. So that's what Necessary Endings is all about. And I just found it such a powerful lens to look at how I bring endings into my life, how I see endings, the stories that I tell myself about that. And it has made it a lot easier for me to say goodbye without a lot of fear or drama.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to read that book.
So
Sounds
good.
good. Sounds really good. Really good. All right. The last one.
Okay. Career and family. So this is written by a woman named Claudia Golden. She's a professor at Harvard, and she's basically the world's preeminent expert in the gender wage gap. And, so often when we think about the gender wage gap, we think about things like pay bias, or we'll tell women you should really negotiate harder, or you should definitely be asking for more. And all of these things are true. The Me Too movement and sexual harassment and that kind of thing at work, these are all real things that women deal with. But they are not the core thing that drives the gender wage gap. The gender wage gap is driven by couple inequity in heterosexual couples, which really speaks to the relative cost of flexibility. So this is material to the work that we do. So I'll sort of break it down. It costs a lot of money to have a really flexible life. So basically, if you want to be like, before this conversation, I took 90 minutes and went to do my leg workout at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was great. It was awesome. And I do that all the time. But to do that, it means that I've had to create a business and look at pricing structure and all these different things where I can have the flexibility that I want. Most people don't get to have that. In most cases, if you want to have flexibility, it means that you have to take a job where you are paid less, where you have less career growth opportunities. And so Claudia Golden, in her book, Career and Family, breaks down a massive research project that she did on 5 generations of women, and how, what the gender wage gap is, why it's still in place, and what actually needs to happen to close it and change it. And the main thing that has to happen is we have to restructure how work is done in order to make it feasible and possible to have both flexibility and money. So she talks about things like greedy jobs. The greedy jobs are the ones that they usually pay the most. It's the kind of job where if an email comes in at 7:30 p.m., you got to answer it.
Right.
You're expected to be on, and you are paid disproportionately high amounts of money to do that. And the worst industries are in business. Finance, consulting are the absolute worst for greedy jobs, And the key is that often, it comes down to heterosexual families where there's a kid or kids. And so what happens is you'll have couple inequity. In order to make a home work, the couple between them will say, okay, one person's going to have a greedy job and one person needs to have a more flexible job. And that often is the woman who's going to choose the more flexible job. Couple inequity happens in same-sex couples too, but it doesn't drive gender inequity. It's sort of status quo. And so, and so correcting it is really about things like really good childcare, but it's also about how we look at structuring businesses in particular, which is our job. Like when we're working with entrepreneurs, how do you set up businesses to really allow for, for great financial gain and opportunity, and the flexibility that people increasingly want. So to me, this was a fascinating book. It's really specific to my area, but if there are women listening, and I know there are, they might find it really fascinating too.
Yeah, it's interesting as we look at how work has changed since COVID, and how it is potentially changing back, right? Like we're still in that changing mode, right? And I think about my own business and the flexibility that I try to provide my own team. Everyone works from home, and sometimes I get a little, I'm going to call a little cranky about all right, well, you get 2 15-minute breaks a day and you get a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. Cause I'm like, no, wait, we work from home. Yeah. So if you have to get up and take your dog outside for a pee, you're going to get up and take your dog outside for a pee. And if you're sitting in your office, you're hungry, you're going to go to the fridge to get something to eat. And if you say, hey, I have a doctor's appointment, I need to step out, we're going to say, okay, no problem. So do we really need scheduled 15-minute breaks? Because to me, it feels like you have so much autonomy. And while you get a 30-minute unpaid break, if you sit and eat your lunch at your desk while you work and you wrap up early, I'm okay with that. But it's like it's almost like we're trying to create more flexibility in the workplace, but people also want structure too.
Yeah.
So it's like,
or they might quiet
I
quit.
Get my break.
Or they might quiet quit.
They might quiet quit. I want my 15-minute break, but at the same time, you took your dog out 4 times, this morning. And I know, because I have dogs, that when you take them out 4 times, they don't all pee just like that. So it's like, we've got to find this, I feel like, give and take within organizations and how we work. And I hear you when you say the greedy jobs, no one wants to feel like they have to respond to an email at 7:30. But if you're someone who wants to go for a 90-minute leg workout in the middle of the day, then you damn well better be answering emails at 7:30 if you're getting paid for an 8-hour workday, right? Like
100%.
There's got to be this kind of give and take. And I feel like there's, in some cases, the give and take isn't equal. It isn't fair. And obviously there are people on both sides of that. There are employers that are not fair, and there are employees that are not fair. And we've got to find middle ground where people can be happy. But I think we're in a little bit of a scary time right now. When you start to see all of these really, really big organizations laying off tens of thousands of people. Well, the trickle effect of that is small businesses are going to be impacted too. And so we go back to the numbers. That's where I am so fiscally responsible. It's like, I'm always trying to make sure that we're good in case.
Yes.
We're good in case. When COVID hit, I was able to go to my team and say, guys, we have like X number of months of runway. You don't need to worry about your job right now. And if we start to lose business, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to keep everybody employed, I will give you lots of notice so you know, right? Yeah. But you can't operate your business with a financial runway if you're not paying attention to the numbers. You can't protect job security if you're irresponsible with money. And so it's just this kind of messy space right now, I think.
Well, I think there's so many factors at play. And I agree with you completely, because I think that we are a big part. I think a lot of women-owned businesses are actually a huge part in figuring out, what do these companies look like and what do these roles look like, where you can both have a big job. And remember, the core thing with a greedy job is that you're paid for the amount of responsibility or the accountability, like what you own is a huge part of that. And what has often happened is that in the working culture of that organization, what that has meant is you own it. You own it at 10 p.m., you own it at 6 a.m., and our culture is such that we're going to, you're going to need to be always on. And so I think that, many of us are really looking at, what does it mean to create a business where these so-called greedy jobs, these jobs that have big accountability and the money to go with it, are a bit more human, where you don't have to sacrifice personal well-being to take on something like this. And to your point, I'm not sure that we have the balance right, or that we even know what it is. I can remember, this was some time ago, I had somebody who, this was so odd. She wanted to be able to look after a kid while she was working. I'm like, no, that's not how we're doing it. That's not how, and it wasn't like, you know what I mean? I was like, look, if you've got a sick kid, if you've got it, that's not what we're talking about here, but this is not a long-term, this is not a long-term solution. This is not happening. You're going to have to figure this out. And we had a very open, honest, right? So this was an open, honest conversation. But I can remember she was a little bit taken aback that as a woman-owned company, she thought I was going to get that. I was like, we are a competitive company in the global economy. Like, this is not what we mean, when we talk about having a woman-owned company, that this is a big free-for-all and people can just do whatever they want because we love everybody. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about shifting how we do business, but making sure that we can still compete. And I mean, so this is interesting, like the whole tech layoffs too. To me, economies have been flush with cash and capital has been so cheap. So the economy has been flush with cash and investors that have been pouring into these industries. It results in massive paydays for their employees, for a lot of them doing nothing. And this sounds so hardcore, but how is Twitter still functional with the amount of layoffs that they had? Listen, there was some fat that could be trimmed there. And I think it is over all these organizations. And the trickle-down effect on small companies is the inordinate salaries that people expect. And the weight that a lot of these companies are having, the inefficiencies that they tolerate because they've had tons of capital thrown at them. So I definitely think between that, quiet quitting, you know what I mean? Like I think there needs to be some form of reckoning in terms of how we look at how we work together to produce economic value in the workplace.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. There's no one size fits all.
We don't sound like Nova Scotians right now.
We don't. We don't. All right. I have one last
Funny.
question for you.
Yes.
I heard a rumor that you have a book coming out.
Oh, that actually is not, I'm working on one, but it's not, this is interesting. I had a book, it was called Why Women Don't Want Power.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I think people can still buy it on Amazon, possibly. It's like pre-sale,
Mm-hmm.
but I pulled the plug on the book because I had this uncomfortable feeling around it. And I've wrestled. I was like, was this like a fear of visibility? And it could possibly have been, but the real reason was that a lot of the ideas in the book were, they felt like they were 75% informed takes on things like gender equity and on things like, and they felt more informed by Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took the time to write the book, and then we've kind of moved on from there. So that book, that book.
So you shelved your own book.
I shelved my own book. I really felt like I couldn't stand on it. And that it wasn't the ideas, they were not solid.
I love that. I love that. Like, who
so
does
painful.
that? Because writing a book
so
is
painful.
hard.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And it was so interesting, you know, I was just like, this is not, and I mean, you know, I think that there's a lot of pseudo expertise in book form, you know. And I was like, I just can't be part of it. So I gave myself a really hard time about it because I was worried, you know, I was really asking myself, is it just that I don't want to put my stuff out there? But it wasn't that. It was that thing that was really holding me back was I didn't think the ideas were sound, and I had to pull them. Yeah, they were a person who was uncovering the ideas, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the full sort of story. So I'm working away, but it's not coming out yet. When it is, yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know.
I'll let the world know. Yes.
Yeah, let me know. Let me read snippets. I'll give you my opinion.
Oh,
and
yeah.
let you know what I think. I think you are so brilliant. I can't imagine that anything you write wouldn't be fantastic. So
thank you.
The world needs your book.
Yes. It's a good kick in the pants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So on the heels of talking about efficiencies, have you read Scrum?
Yes.
Yeah.
We run
really
Scrum.
Good. Oh, do you?
That book, you know, I read Scrum and that was it. We moved to Scrum, and the implementation of Scrum is interesting because it's so focused. And so that's a whole other, you know, the successful implementation of Scrum is hard. Also fun. Yeah, it's hard, but man, I love the book.
So I'm curious, what do you use for project management tool?
Yeah, Google spreadsheets.
Really?
Yeah. We tried Asana, we tried Trello, like we used a bunch of different ones, but ultimately we still haven't been able to find anything for our purposes superior to Google spreadsheets. What about you?
I'm currently living in Asana hell.
Oh.
It's great. I love it.
It's the details, right? It's like,
it's the details, it's the naming conventions, it's trying to find things, naming conventions. And it's, you know, it's like you need a course on just how to organize information flow so people can find what they're looking for. It's
library science. Like we're going to market to hire somebody, and I literally want, like, if somebody were, if I could find a good library science person, you know, I'm all about that, because I agree with you with how we store information, because we produce reams of information. Nobody's talking about it. All of the content that's produced that we're not, you know, that we just lose track of. It's a huge untapped asset. Yeah.
I bought the Kanban book that that was recommended in Scrum, but I haven't read it yet. I'm interested in that because I like the idea of the boards. You know, this is what needs to be done. This is what's doing. This is what's done. I really like that idea.
Yes.
But, in our work on the marketing agency side of things, there's so many moving parts and so many clients. It's just,
Totally.
I find it so hard to really find a tool that is effective at managing all of that. So I was curious if you had one, but sounds like
good old,
good
I'm in
old
your shoes in that.
Google.
Yeah, exactly.
Good old Google.
Exactly. Good old Google.
All right. Well, Eleanor, this has been fantastic. I feel like I want to have you back to have another conversation just about business in general and not just books. I think that would be so much fun. Yes, we must. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the book recommendations. I am going to definitely buy Necessary Endings and Boundaries and read those. They will be on my list. I have a bunch of books that I haven't read sitting over here, one of which is called The Crux. I'm not sure if you've read that yet or not. It was recommended to me. And then I just got Dan Martell's book. I think it's called Buy Back Your Time.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but
I have to check it out.
I saw so many people talking about it. Yeah, he is. Yeah. He is fun.
Yeah.
Great East Coast success story.
Yes.
And so anyways, I bought his book to see and what it's all about, but I haven't started reading it yet. So there's some books for you.
Yes, I love it.
All right. So if you're listening to this episode of She Talks Business and you go to my website and you look for Eleanor, you can find all the links to all the places that she hangs out. I follow her on Instagram. I think she does a really, really nice job there, but I'll also link to her website so you can learn more about her. And if you haven't already joined Thought Readers, thoughtreaders.com. It is my free business book club. I've had a few people reach out and ask me, how come you got rid of your $1,000 a year, $1,200 a year book club and went to a free book club? And so I think I just might have to do a little episode on necessary endings and why we had to change the format. So stay tuned for another episode. Thank you so much, Eleanor. It was great, great, great to have you here.
Thank you.